Have you ever finished a book and felt a certain weight in your heart, but you couldn't find the right words to describe it? Today, I want to talk about a story that left me in the limbo between fantasy and reality. Welcome to Pages and Afterwards. My name is Lily. This is a place where I give voice to the feelings, questions, and lingering echoes that remain after finishing a book. No polished reviews or deep academic analysis here. Just honest thoughts and casual reflections on the books I read. So let's get started. Welcome back to Pages and Afterwards, everybody. I hope you're doing well. By the time this episode is uploaded, it will be in April, and April to me is always the fresh start because most of the fiscal year starts in April here in Japan. And April is when the weather's finally turning like spring. You see cherry blossoms, and it just kind of like you can feel the spring in the air when April's around. So if you're diving into a new environment, whether that's a school or that's a new workplace or just any kind of new environment, congratulations. And hopefully in those new environment that will probably like you're a bit nervous about, this episode provides like a little spot of comfort to you. Okay, so the book I'm talking about today is Kyukanbi no Kanojotachi, or the English title is When the Museum is Closed by Emi Yagi. This is the second book of hers that I've read. The story of When the Museum is Closed follows a woman named Rika Horauchi. She gets a very, very unusual part-time job at a museum, which is to be a conversational partner for a statue of Venus from ancient Rome. She was recommended for this role by her university professor because she studied and is relatively fluent in Latin, a dead language, and the one that's spoken by the Venus. The story revolves around Rika, the Venus, and another museum staff member. This is a very quirky setup, but beneath it, we also see sort of like glimpses of Rika's own struggles that she's carried since childhood. So let's go into my feelings and thoughts. To be honest, I think today's episode is going to be a little bit shorter than usual. Apologies if it just ends up being around the same time as the rest of the episode, like the rest of my podcast episodes. The reason why I think that this might be a short episode is not because I didn't have much to say, but because I'm finding it hard to be very logical about how this book made me feel. Like, I know it's not the best example, but like when you're young, or maybe I don't know, whatever your age, and you drink a little bit too much, and the next morning you have almost no memory of the last night, but you definitely still have the feelings or like a lingering feeling that I don't know what happened, but I know I had a good time last night. Do you know what I mean? It just after reading this book, it made me like that. I knew immediately that I had a great time reading this book, but the moment I tried to put it into words, like what it was that made me this way, they just keep slipping away from me. Like, I know the feeling is there, but I just don't know how to describe it. And I can't really pinpoint any specific like storyline or specific moment in the book that gave me that feelings. Like, I have this emotional stir inside me, but I just don't have any ways of describing it. But one thing I can say is that there are many like metaphors and descriptions that I didn't necessarily understand in a literal sense. The questions keep popping up in your head while you're reading the book. And usually when that happens and those questions never really get answered inside the book, then that will make me feel frustrated generally. But not with this book. Like all these questions that I have, it maybe due to lack of my analytical skills, but like never really, like nothing really gets explained in this book as to why it is what it is. And you know, you can immediately tell from the setting or premise of this book that your job is to talk to a statue. Like that doesn't happen in real life, holding a conversation with a stone statue, you know. So even before you read the book, you immediately know that this is not like a very much of a real life episode, but you know that it's fantasy. But this book walks this very thin, fine line between being a total fantasy and somehow seems like this could happen in real life. I hope that makes sense. Like I was in a limbo because while I was reading, I knew that this was a fantasy. I knew this, like whatever is described in this book, it's not going to, like it's not something that you see in your real life. But at the same time, it felt so real. I don't know how to put it into words, but that's the entire feeling that I got from this. But let me just give you a few examples of all the like, you know, the metaphors and descriptions that I didn't quite understand in a real literal sense, just to give you an idea. So one thing that really caught my attention was that all the characters' names were written in katakana. So I don't know how familiar you are with the language of Japanese, but in Japanese we have like 3 types of alphabets. One is katakana, another one is hiragana, and the other one is kanji. So katakana is usually used for foreign words and consists of very sharp lines compared to hiragana or kanji. And I kept wondering why the author chose to use katakana to express the names, because names usually have kanjis because it's a Japanese name, you know. If you have a foreign name, then that would be katakana would be generally used, but all these people, apart from maybe Venus, were Japanese, or at least their names were Japanese. So I don't like I kept on thinking like, does this have a very deep meaning that the reason why it was expressed in katakana is this to give a certain impression of each person? I'm still not sure, but what it made me realize is that this is a very specific reading experience that you can only have in Japanese. Well, maybe only have in Japanese might be a bit of a stretch because I don't know every single language in this country. But for example, if you're reading in English, then there aren't different ways of expressing the same thing, if you know what I mean. Like if you want to describe air conditioner, for example, there's only one way of spelling it, right? Whereas in Japanese, you can write it in aircon, which is generally in katakana, but you can also write it in Japanese and people will understand that's what it is. And we also have kanji for air conditioning, which is sounds different, but like the same meaning. So I don't know if you understand this, but like katakana, hiragana, and kanji, they all give me different visual texture of it. All the impressions that you get from that character is very, very different. Like as I said, katakana consists of very much of a sharp lines, so it gives me a bit of like a distance. And then when it was written in Japanese, and that would give me a bit of a cozy feeling attached to it. I hope this makes sense. long story short, I realized that me thinking, oh, why is this author writing their names in katakana? It never really happens if I read this in a translated version, right? So that was something that I just like my mind kind of fixated on. And another point that I liked but didn't really understand the full meaning of it was the transition of Rika's dreams. So in the beginning, she used to dream in like still photos, like nothing really moved in her dreams growing up. But then eventually they start to move like a video, like the usual dreams I believe that most people would have. It is a quiet change, and although it is definitely described in the book of those transitions, but it, it's not like something big happened at that moment. You know, there was no big bang. It's just like accumulation of all those interactions with the Venus and Rika's own development that would had an effect on her dream being from still photos to movies. But I didn't understand because there was no like big moment associated with that change, that I didn't understand the entire significance of this change. But it also kind of definitely gave me an impression that that Rika was changing. All right. So finally, let me share a line that really stayed with me. So I'll read it in Japanese first and then I'll translate it into English. Here we go. 誰かとの時間のすべてを言葉で埋めなくてもいいということは、ミセスオナガから聞いた。I learned from Mrs. Onaga that you don't have to fill every moment spent with someone with words. So the reason why I really liked this line was because it is true. I appreciate a relationship, whether that's with my friends, my partner, my parents, whoever, that you don't feel the need, you don't feel the pressure to fill the silence that is between you and the other person. It is particularly interesting because Rika's job is literally to fill the silence for the statue, be a conversational partner. But I think it also signifies that she also realized that silence itself could be a form of being together in the moment. So this is kind of stayed with me because I know it's true, and it also has like a quiet shift in Rika's perspective. All right. So that's all for today's episode. I know this was a bit of an abstract episode today, wasn't it? Have you ever read a book that felt like a dream you couldn't quite explain, or the book that you know that it's not real, but you can't shake the feelings that this could happen in your life? If you have one of those books, please do let me know in the comment. And thank you so much for listening today. I hope this episode gave you something to think about, or perhaps mirror the feeling that you've had after closing a book. If you enjoyed our time together, please follow the channel or leave a comment. All right, until I see you in the next episode. Bye!